France was first inhabited by the Gauls in the 7th century BC. It was then conquered by the Romans. Following the Romans, various Germanic tribes settled in France, such as the Normans. Between the 10th and 14th centuries, the Capetians ruled France. They tried to weaken the power of the nobles and build a central government. France also participated in the 100 Years' War. Joan of Arc gave them the strength to battle the English and have pride for their country. The French absolute monarchy brought an abundance of power to French kings. Henry IV was a Huguenot who converted to Catholicism in order to unite the French people. His famous quote to illustrate this was, "Paris is well worth a Mass." Mass is strictly a Catholic celebration, while the Protestants hold services. Henry IV created the Edict of Nantes, which aided in ending religious wars. He created a central government and successfully disciplined his army. However, many money issues existed, such as the unjust system of taxes. The tax collectors made themselves rich by keeping the surplus to themselves. The clergy didn't even have to pay the direct tax known as the tithe.
It's so good of these church leaders to make the poor people pay, right? Anyway, to fix those issues, Henry hired the Duke of Sully as Minister of Finances. The Duke was able to get rid of unnecessary political offices and tax abuses, but the privileged nobles and the clergy was still exempt. With all the money the Duke saved, it was possible to spend some of it on trade and industry. In 1610, Henry was stabbed by a monk, which makes sense because he wanted the clergy to actually contribute to society. Henry's wife, Marie de Medici, became a regent until her son, Louis XIII, came of age. However, Louis was weak and feeble, so his mother had to rule 3 years after he became of age. It's like the 30-year-old guy who still lives with his parents and doesn't pay rent. When Louis finally became independent and enough to rule, he had to pick able advisors to assist him. The most notable of these was Cardinal Richelieu. The cardinal really loved the king and wanted him to be supreme, which was interesting because Louis XIII really stunk at being king. In order to accomplish the king becoming supreme, he needed to destroy the nobles and the independence of the Huguenots, and encourage trade and industry. In addition, he also wanted the nation of France to be supreme. This involved tearing down the Spanish and Austrian Habsburgs. So why did Richelieu hate on the Huguenots? They were like states within a state. While they existed, a central government was out of the question. Of course, what do people do when they feel threatened? They attack, which is exactly what Richelieu did to the La Rochelle seaport. I don't know about you, but I think these clergy members are such wonderful models of Christianity. The Huguenots asked for peace once they were attacked, so this gave Richelieu an opportunity to limit their freedom. He did still let them worship, hold public office, and be educated, but nothing else.
Next, Richelieu had to bring down the nobles. He did this simply by destroying their castles. He also appointed province governors who were educated people who supported the concept of a supreme king. The power of intendants, middle-class people who were responsible to the king, and hated nobles grew greatly. Meanwhile, in the rest of Europe, the conflicts at the Peace of Augsburg supposedly resolved never truly died down. 300 princes didn't like being told what to do by the Holy Roman Empire and France. Denmark and Sweden were out to get any country that had a lot of power. All of these issues combined resulted in the 30 Years' War. I'm sorry, but if it takes anyone 30 years to resolve a conflict, is it even worth it? France was essentially just trying to bully the Holy Roman Empire and the Habsburgs by fighting them. The war finally ended with the Treaty of Westphalia, which recognized the Netherlands and Switzerland as an independent nations. It weakened the Habsburgs greatly, which was highly advantageous to the French because they were such an important European power. On top of all the fighting they had to deal with, rebellion also came into being between 1648 and 1652. The Frondeurs were nobles that led peasants to war against royalty. The word Frondeurs refers to schoolboys who shot slingshots when the teacher wasn't looking. Remember that kid who threw spitballs in your class? Yeah, he could lead a rebellion someday. Cardinal Mazarin put an end to these rebellions for over 130 years. Finally, we see a bright king, Louis XIV, the Sun King. So why does he get such an awesome nickname? The rays of the sun are a symbol of the extent of his power. He made the Grand Palace of Versailles, which made some people think of him as a bit too extravagant. He also claimed divine right, meaning that he can basically do whatever he wants because he was under the guidance of God. Louis XIV made the nobles serve him. They did things that any human can do for themselves, such as dress him and tuck him in at night. Louis XIV appointed Jean-Baptiste Colbert to get rid of the corruption in tax farming. Yes, that's right, they still had issues with that. In 1685, he revoked the Edict of Nantes, which really hurt the unity of France. Many French people left the country. The king also made an amazing army. The Secretary of State for War, Marquis de Louvois, completely reorganized the army and disciplined it. That's so there are no more Wickham-type people. General Jean Martinet caused the English to invent a new word because he was all about the discipline.
Good thing they made that awesome army, because right after that, 5 countries went to 4 wars with France to get a balance of power. The last of these wars resulted in the Spanish succession. When the last Spanish Habsburg king died, the throne was left to Philip Anjou, which angered many people because the French had way too much power. In 1713, they finally ended the wars with the Treaty of Utrecht. The nations decided that Philip can be the king of Spain, but he can't unite France and Spain. In other words, he had to have 2 different faces. Naturally, France had a large colonial empire. Explorers such as Jacques Cartier and Sam de Champlain settled into Canada and other various areas of North America. They discovered that the mountains and lakes of North America and used them to their advantage. What happened after the death of Louis XIV? Everything went downhill for the monarchy. This was because Louis XV had no self-esteem. I'm guessing they didn't have counselors back then. Another factor was that all the wars completely exhausted the French. The nobles got back to their power too. Basically, everything went back to how it was before. That is the complete history of the absolute monarchy in France.